Welcome to Dare to Be Seen. Join our host, Alyssa DiNapoli, aka Alyssa Vulpez, author, artist coach, and singer-songwriter, as she engages in down-to-earth, insightful, and inspiring conversations with female indie singer-songwriters, composers, and musicians. We shall discuss the lessons and personal stories of women who dare to be seen, scratching beneath the surface to explore challenging truths, forge deeper connections, and foster personal transformation. Get inspired, and if you enjoy the show, spread the word by subscribing and reviewing it. And now, let's get started.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Dare to Be Seen. My name is Elisa Di Napoli, aka Elisa Vulpes, and today's guest is Rosie Bans. Now, Glasgow born and bred, Rosie Bans has grown up on a vibrant diet of Alice Cooper, Bert Jansch, and the Spice Girls. She's a whirlwind creative force. Has released 6 EPs, 1 full-length studio album, the latter generously funded by Creative Scotland. Hitting the fiery highs and self-reflective lows of human emotion, her repertoire continues to expand and pulse, while her debut album, Identify Yourself, honed in on straight-talking topics of mental health and grief, in particular surrounding the loss of her own mother. Rosie now switches gears in a post-pandemic world for a different kind of rhythm, which she explores in her upcoming 5-track EP, Flourish. Not shy in the realm of social justice, Rosie is committed to supporting the music industry, becoming a place for people to truly thrive in. She currently runs Fase, an audio collective for women, non-binary folks, and gender non-conforming producers. She's also co-founder of Song Seeds Songwriting Retreats, providing affordable and accessible online songwriting camps to artists of all abilities. Now, just before we meet Rosie, here's a short message for you. If you suffer from stage nerves and your anxiety gets in the way of your performance, well, it's time to discover the 3 secrets that will stop stage fright and allow you to perform with authentic confidence, even if you're not an extrovert. So I invite you to register today for my free Dare to Be Seen masterclass, where you will discover how to magnify your presence and command the stage so you can perform at your best in front of a larger audience. Just head on over to tinyurl.com/dare to be seen masterclass. That's tinyurl.com/dare to be seen masterclass. And now, here's a guest for today. Welcome to the show, Rosie. I am quite excited to have you. You are full of skills and experience, and I can't wait to pick your brains today.
Amazing. Thank you for having me. And I can't say that many people introduce me as full of skills and experience. So I will take that. And I've just had my lunch, so I'm also full of food as well.
Right. Well, you are a singer-songwriter, producer. You also do songwriting retreats. You're very interested in social justice and making the industry, the music industry, a place where people can thrive. So there's a lot to talk about. But first, I guess I would like to ask you just a simple question, which is about how you actually got into music in general.
Wow. Wow. Okay. Well, music's just always been a part of my life. And since like being a child, basically, from very, very, very young age, I always sang songs. I was always making noises. And actually, I was really into the sound of music because my nana, my grandmother, would babysit me and watch it. Like we would always be on. So I knew all the words and I knew all the melodies. And I remember getting a biro pen and like carving a piano, like just lines basically, into my chest of drawers in my bedroom. Very naughty of me. And so when my mum and dad discovered it, I think, when the initial kind of, "Oh my god, she's ruined a perfectly good pair of or set of drawers," um, they they went, well, we better get her a keyboard then, right? So more so she doesn't go around wrecking the rest of the house. So yeah, I got a keyboard when I was super young. I was like 5 or 6 years old. And I remember going to Argos with my dad on Sucky Street in the city centre of Glasgow and walking up and getting this like tiny little Casio keyboard. And I was so excited. I couldn't even wait until we got home and I like begged him, please, 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 can we play it now? And we got the batteries and all that. We bought the batteries with it. And me and my dad sat in the middle of Sucky Street playing this little Casio keyboard. And it is like one of my favorite memories and definitely a foundation, like a fundamental memory of how important music was. But yeah, I suppose from that too, my dad's a musician. He's a blues guitarist, totally self-taught, absolutely adores like finger picking blues, folk guitar, like Bert Jansch, Davy Graham, all those guys from the 70s. So I grew up listening to him playing Vestapole and just playing all these like really cool blues folk standard guitar pieces. And I was just enamored by it. I would sit in front of my dad down by his feet in my pajamas after my bath at night time, and he would just play guitar and I would just be like mesmerized. So that's how I get started in music. Very much part of my life.
That's hilarious. It's like it was just destined from the start. and how did you then get into music production from being I suppose a singer songwriter? I'm presuming. How did you get
Yes,
into
yeah.
actual production? Because, for fortunately for a lot of women, it's kind of rare. We are used to seeing women playing the guitar, playing the piano, singing, but not a lot of women are in music production. So how did you get started with that?
I've always gravitated toward technology. And when I was in high school, so like even before I was a singer songwriter or before I knew what I was doing with music when I was just in education. And I also want to preface all this with I'm definitely very lucky and privileged that I had a family that could support that in me. We were a relatively poor family from Anderson in the city centre, but we had enough to provide. And also, secondly, that I went to a high school that had free music education, and it's becoming less and less now in the UK that that's even possible. So in high school, we had like this DAT tape. I don't know if you remember them. I'm 33, so this is like way, way back in the early 2000s, this DAT tape. And I remember doing a course in school as part of the curriculum, which was music inventing, they called it. So it was just composition. And I was already getting some piano lessons in school for free, which was amazing. And I remember the day I found out I could play some piano and then using this DAT tape 8-track recorder, I could play another line of piano on top, or I could sing on top, or I could just multi-track. And I just loved it. I was like, oh my God, I can do anything I want with this. And so that was kind of literally the beginning of music production for me, and realizing that this technology, I can utilize this to explore it. The technology in and of itself can be a tool through which I can continue being creative, and I'm no longer bound by the restrictions that just having two hands and one instrument gave me. So that was definitely the beginnings of technology. And then I upgraded from my tiny little Casio keyboard to a slightly bigger Yamaha keyboard, which it had like 3 tracks you could record. So it was like a little mini digital 3-track recorder just inbuilt in this little Yamaha home keyboard. And I remember just spending hours and hours and hours like practicing parts, hitting the metronome, recording it in, deciding it wasn't in time, doing it again. And it really was a space that, using this super basic technology right back then as well. And I didn't even really know what it was I was doing, but it lit me up and I really gravitated towards it. So moving forward from there, when I went to college after high school. I'd done music. I went straight to college in Glasgow to study music keyboards, specifically keyboards. I was a performer and I was doing keyboard performance. That my amazing tutor there, and I'd also went to an excellent college. It was North Glasgow College. I think now it's called Kelvin College, Glasgow Kelvin College. But the lecturers there were just absolutely phenomenal. And I had a very supportive piano teacher who, once he realized that I was really into this multi-tracking and I wanted to, do my own songs and write my own songs, and I would chatter about it all the time. He actually drove me into town to go and buy my first computer, like my first MacBook, basically. So I literally went with my lecturer so that I got the right one for the specs within my budget that I had, and that I could, open it up and just jump into GarageBand. And he really kind of helped me, took me by the hand with that. And I was only 16 back then. So yeah, that was definitely the beginning of music production, inverted commas. For me, it's always just been the one thing. It's been a vehicle through which I can continue to be creative and express myself. So kind of like a bit up and round, but that's how it all began anyways.
Yeah. And so when people sometimes, think of music production, it can be a bit of a word that they might not know what it means. A lot of people go, yeah, but what is it? What does it actually mean? And so how would you define the actual being a music producer? I know it's maybe a difficult
Yeah.
question, but
It's a great question. It's a really great question, and you're absolutely right. A lot of people aren't too sure what it is or if they are one. And for me, being a music producer is that I am the person with the creative vision. I'm the person that essentially has the objective in mind and knows where I want this piece of music to go. So whether that's live with a band in a music studio, or whether it's just me on the laptop, it's or collaborating with an artist. It's with an artist, it's really interesting because the producer and the artist can very much work in tandem and in collaboration and together come to the vision. And then it's the producer's job to do what they can with what they've got and with maybe the budget that the artist has got to achieve that vision. So that's what I see it as. And someone once made the analogy that a music producer is a little bit like a theatre director. So everything that's happening on the stage happens under the influence, guidance, and direction of the director. So nothing's going on that stage that the director hasn't overseen. And I feel like that's what being a producer is. It's a bit like that. Plus, with the added addition of finance, quite often, I think people don't think about it like that too. But being a producer very much means using what you've got to get to where you need to go. And okay, sometimes we want to say, oh, I wish I had an extra $100 to buy this or buy that instrument or hire that musician. But if you don't have that, it's the producer's job to say, okay, well, now what can we use and how can we still achieve ultimately this goal of this great song, this great work. So for me, that's what a music producer is.
right. And then when we go into mixing and mastering, right? Then usually we would think, well, that's work of the music engineer, the mixing engineer. Sometimes producers are also mixing engineers, but the opposite is not true. Is that correct?
What do you mean the opposite is not true?
Well, meaning, a mixing engineer isn't necessarily a music producer, but a music producer often is also a mixing engineer. Is that true?
That's interesting. I would argue no, because and only because it's so fluid and it depends on each person. So, for example, pre-COVID, BC, before COVID, in the days before, I was working with a band and I was producing the band. It was my band, and so I would be in the studio in the live room with the band, and most of them were all hired musicians, so session musicians. And I would have a very specific, focused vision for what I wanted each, part of the song to sound like, how I would like the drummer and the bassist to work together, for example, when I would be there. But then once the band left the studio, I would sit next to the mix engineer and we would work together on the mix. And then I would go home and I'd get a mix sent to me, and then I would give back lots of revisions. And so I worked absolutely in tandem in collaboration with the mix engineer. However, now I do it all myself. So I write, record, and mix and master a lot of my own work. So now I'm a producer and a mixer. But in the past, I was a producer and wasn't a mix engineer at all. So it flows. It's so fluid, and I really do think it depends on the work that you're doing in that moment, the piece of music and what that music needs. Because if someone wanted me to produce, I don't know, a genre that perhaps I wasn't entirely, say, confident in mixing in, but knew what I wanted to hear. So let's say like a heavy metal track or something. I've got a lot of experience listening, enjoying, and being a real heavy metal fan with a little bit of experience of performing it. If I was working with a band, I would have quite a lot of visions. I could understand where I would maybe want the track to go, but there's no way I could sit and mix a heavy metal track right now with the skills I've got. So I would need to pass that on to someone. But if someone came to me wanting to work on a dream pop track or just a straight up pop track, I could quite happily sit and mix that. So yeah, it's just finding your skill set, finding where that Venn diagram is of where you're at and where the collaborators around you are at and how you overlap and what you want from it as well.
Right, that makes a lot of sense. That I guess that makes me a producer as well, because I've been producing my own music for a long time. I just never thought I actually am, but maybe it's just the old "Am I good enough" kind of dialogue, And you talk a bit about identifying and honing your own unique style as a producer. In our chat before our interview, I was wondering if you could, talk a little bit more about that. How do you, or how did you, find your identity and your own style?
Making a lot of music, for sure, number one. I think it can be very easy to think, or maybe it's hard to think actually. It can be quite challenging to just sit and think. But I feel like we do a lot of thinking. And as soon as you take it from the realm of internal in the mind and you bring it to the external and you make it tangible. So you go off and you just make tons of music and you see the threads that run throughout all the music that you've made. Those threads are your identity. That is your musical, your sonic identity. Um, it can be really hard to understand what that is if there's just not a lot of music on the table. So that would be number one. I wrote tons and tons of songs. I've released 6 EPs, one full length studio album. It's just there's a lot of music I've made, and through doing so, yeah, you do. You just get to a space where you know what you love and you know maybe what you're not so into, and also you appreciate when you make a lot of music all the time, you appreciate how changeable it is and how fluid you are as a human being. That the woman I am at the age of 33 was not the young woman I was when I was 23. Absolutely not. And thank God for that. She deserves to just remain back there. I think as most of our 23-year-old selves do, in which a beautiful time of life, but it's just two different human beings. And okay, there's a thread that runs through all of our lives, maybe like our value systems or, just something that we do hold on to feel grounded in identifying who we are as people. I think it's the same when you're a music creator as well, but you have to have a lot of life experience to know what it is that you believe in life. And it's the same in music. You have to write a lot of music to know what it is that you want to say and how you want to say it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. When I was 23, a long, long, long time ago, I also did not have a clue what I wanted, who I was. Just beginning to know that now, and also my music, did not sound nearly as good as how it sounds now. Now I know that you have you founded this group, this collective of producers called Phase, and I do want to talk a lot about that. And I believe that this is to do with the fact that women, there is not a lot of women producers. And so, before we talk about Phase, I want to ask you, why do you think there's not as many women producers as there are men? What's going on there?
Wow, it's vast. And I mean, you mentioned something earlier about yourself, actually, where you said, "Oh, I think I am a producer now." That I just spoke about how I identify as being a producer, what it means to me, and then now you're thinking, "Oh, maybe I am too." However, the things that hold us back from identifying ourselves, quite often as women, there's a tendency to need to tick a lot of the boxes before we can actually put ourselves forward. And this is really apparent in, like, for example, the PRS Foundation's fund for music. They're open funds, and they found they were having a lot of men applying and not that many women applying. And it was difficult to kind of reach out and understand why. So by creating a brand new fund and just calling it the Women Make Music Fund, and just actually making a space that is very um explicitly for women, then so much more women applying. It's the same fund. It's pretty much the exact same pot of money. It's just been rebranded a little bit. So there is something in society that begs women to feel the need for permission, I think. And I don't know. I mean, for me, I think it comes from the very beginnings. Like, as soon as we're born, there's different things attached to us based on our gender. I mean, people even have gender reveal parties, even though that child hasn't actually lived anything yet. So I think our gender, and what people mean by that is our sex at birth, there's a lot of societal norms applied to that sex. So then you start growing up and you're a little girl and you're a little boy, and that's how the world treats you as such. So, the little girl's maybe a little bit less encouraged to climb a tree, fall down and skin her knee, whereas the little boy is allowed and maybe even more encouraged to be a bit more boisterous. And all of these, like, small but very important societal constructs. I think when we become adults and women, it's very difficult to shake them off or even identify them. So just like that little girl that was, maybe discouraged to just go out there and be dead loud and climb that tree and, mess around, is now also discouraged a little bit from putting their name down and saying, "I am a music producer and I deserve some money for this project because it's great," and there's been quite a lot of research into particularly children and around the age of like 5, 6, and 7, when they start becoming very self-aware. So a child up until that sort of age, they don't notice the difference between me and you and boy, girl, woman. It's just everybody's just very, very similar, and then becomes that stage of self-awareness. And that's, unfortunately, I think, where we've got a big problem, because we've got social media and we've got 9 and 10-year-olds on TikTok, and TikTok itself and social media itself, and it's not just TikTok, there's many other ones, but there's a lot of messaging in there, and the messaging, in my opinion, is problematic at best. And so I think it just all filters up. We're all creatures of collaboration and communication, and these are communication tools that are triggering our dopamine responses. So by the time you are like in your maybe mid-20s and you want to take your music seriously, you've already got to battle against all these barriers to just stand up and just, again, like that little kid, we stand up and be like, "I'm allowed to take up space. I want to do this thing because I believe I can." So for for me, working with women and working in Phase, something that comes up time after time again is confidence, and the sense of, like, self-identifying, like calling yourself a music producer, and feeling like that's okay, you're allowed to decide. I've noticed, and I felt it too, of course, that's difficult. And I want to also, like, preface all of this, all of the above, with the fact that I'm a cis straight white woman here talking, and I'm talking about struggles that I felt and that I'm fully aware, and trying my best to hold space for people who are even being further marginalised than I am, you know? So with Phase, that's what we're attempting to lay a foundation as much as we can, to just create a space where anybody who feels like this outside world, the world outside Phase, let's say, just has not got enough space for them that they can come into Phase, and there they can stand up and say, I'm a music producer, and have people around that do nothing but support that and say, cool, great, that's brilliant talk, you know. So
Yeah, yeah, it's all conditioning, isn't it? I mean, I remember being 8 years old and reading a book that said basically, "Oh, women are stupid and weak," and I was enraged. I was like, "What?" But you know, even though I was enraged, it definitely shaped my consciousness. I mean, I still remember it, and I'm you know in my midlife now. And was it ever difficult for you to say I am a producer? And if so, how did you overcome that obstacle?
well, definitely. Very recently, actually, because of COVID has been this really it's a phenomena that's happened in society as well, and in the music industry too. And for me, COVID, when the lockdown happened, um, I I always had loads and loads and loads of time because all my work was gone, all my gigs. I was a gigging musician for ever since of my whole adult life, and all my gigs were gone. So, and I was very lucky to get some funding from Help Musicians UK, thankfully, like, really totally saved me in that moment, but they also allowed me to get a life coach. So I started working with Sharon Stevens, who's a life coach, um, and through working with her, I realized there was a lot of stuff I wanted to do in my career that I just hadn't done yet. But now I didn't have any of the hamster wheel activities, you know, going and gigging and finding the next gig. And it was always very much about income as well, to an extent that I had a lot of space on the table to look at, like, what do I actually want in my life? Not even just as a musician, but what do I want? Like, what kind of lifestyle do I want? And I felt like I'd never allowed myself to think like that before. I'm from a very working class black background that's like my working class background pretty much dictated to me that everything needs to be a struggle. And I had a real belief system that for me to be successful, it had to hurt and it had to be a struggle. And then here I am sitting with all this time in my hands, no money, but time. And this person saying, no, you can do whatever you want. You can. Like, it's okay, that's a bit problematic language is there. I don't mean that. Like, you can do whatever you feel like your ambition wants to take you to. You can take the next step towards it. You might never get there, but you're allowed to take the next step. And that next step, you're allowed to be really happy doing that. That doesn't need to be a struggle. So I realized making my own music and being a music producer was who I was. That's what I always have been. And I just had never allowed myself to embody that space because of fear, because of lack of seeing any other people that I felt I connected with. All through my career, I felt totally unsupported by all the close people in my life, in my music career, the people that were closest to me, like my bandmates and the musicians that I would hire often, and even some people like going on tour with, I felt really unsupported. And I only realized that at the start of 2020 that I need support. I can't be the support in every project. I need it sometimes. So that was when I decided, like, I am a music producer. This entire time, I've been making music on my terms and in the way that I want. So now, from this point onwards, I'm actually going to push that to the forefront of my career instead of it being some kind of like secret in a cupboard in the back of my head that I'm a bit scared to just say. So that was only at the start of 2020. And the first thing I done was find support. That was the first thing I done because like I said, I'd identified that I didn't have it. And I done that through firstly applying for that fund. It was the Transmission Fund, Help Musicians UK. Very, very lucky and grateful that I got that and got a life coach. But secondly, I just got in touch with all the women I knew that were even not in my network, but like the next level out my network, and says, "Hey, can I have a Skype or a Zoom with you for like half an hour and pick your brains about being a music producer? Because I really want to be one, and you are one, and I really admire the work that you do, and I would just love to be able to chat to you." And people were just beautiful and really, really supportive. So that's how I done it. I just surrounded myself with women who were doing what I want to do and who I respected and admired, because I totally, totally believe that we are just so affected by the environment that we have around us, even in a digital format. So I just created that environment, and that's where Phase came from. It sounds quite selfish actually, but I started Phase because I just wanted to be surrounded by amazing wo- women, amazing people who were music producers and who I just weren't seeing all the time, who didn't have this kind of really um, laddie, full on energy about them, but people instead who had a really open, communicative, like community vibe about them. So, because that's what I wanted to be. So that was how I started. I feel like I hacked it a little bit by doing that. So thanks everybody if you're listening.
That's a wonderful story. You're completely inspired me now. And I mean, I've already joined Phase, but now I'm going to be a much more active member, because this is wonderful. I can really relate to everything you're saying. I think 2020 and now 2021 has really been a space for people to take a little bit of time out of their usual routine and kind of take a step back and have an overview of their life. And sometimes this has been, not so pleasant, because maybe you realize, oh, my life is not what I want it to be. But then that's also an opportunity to go, okay, well, how do I want it to be? And we are lucky enough that we can make these changes. We do have, most of us, a roof over our head. We are privileged enough. And I think it's important not to use this privilege to feel guilty, but instead to use it well, because it's an insult to you to just feel guilty about your privilege, not even using it. I think there is a responsibility there. So so if anybody wants to join Phase, they need to be either women producer or non-binary producers, and it's a group on Facebook. Is that correct?
Yes, so we have a group on Facebook, and we're a really we're a community we want it to be as safe as we possibly can make it, considering it's on the internet, which in and of itself can be a very difficult space, of course. But we're not exclusive. So we're inclusive as much as possible. So anybody who wants to join, who can support, that can support a space where everyone within that space feels safe and comfortable to put their hand up and ask a question. For us, that's kind of like the bar. That's the leveler. If you feel like you can ask a question, no matter how stupid you might think the question is, because that's always the caveat, isn't it? Oh, it's a stupid question, even though there's no such thing. But as long as that is that's in the fabric of the space, then that's what we're aiming for. So yeah, we're a Facebook group. Initially, that's how we started, and now we're also currently in the middle of production on doing a podcast where we're interviewing other music producers in the community and just finding out how they started, and we're taking a deep dive into one piece of their work, and they can tell us about how they actually produced the work. So we're a podcast too. We're going to be running some events coming up the second half of the year. So there's a mixture of things, spaces, experiences for people, and we're growing. We're all volunteers. There was three of us that set it up. Myself, another producer, Jen Athen, and another producer called Jigsaw Tiger. Unfortunately, Jigsaw Tiger got COVID at the very start of of Phase, but she's doing a lot better now, which is so shout out, hello, I hope you're feeling better. But yeah, so the three of us just kind of passing it around. So we're slowly just building the foundation of it. And we've got great ideas for expansion. But for right now, it's just having that space to inspire, to network, support, and a bit of education through our YouTube channel where we're doing some tutorials, just straightforward information. Like knowledge should not be hoarded. Knowledge doesn't belong to man, right? It doesn't belong to anything, anyone. Knowledge, it's in its essence, like it only exists if it's shared. Otherwise, it's a secret, right? So, um, we're all about just sharing any knowledge that we've got, not as experts, but just as people who utilize this stuff, and then just seeing how that filters out. And so far, it's been doing really well. And that's the most beautiful thing about Phase is when somebody has a question, everyone piles in with answers, and you're like, there's an abundance of knowledge where sometimes it can feel like it's a dark art and it's really hard to find out information. That's we're trying to demystify all of that. So yeah, that's what Phase is at the moment. Kind of a little mixture of things going on.
And by the way, how did you come up with the name Phase?
How did we come up with a name? Because we had literally exactly 1 million other names. And we originally were called Women Producers Meet, and that was problematic. I got called out on using women with an X, because I hadn't educated myself enough on the how exclusionary that term, that word was. So we quickly were like, let's change the name. This isn't what we want it to be. We need to do better. And so yeah, we had like 1 million names, and it literally is just a word. It doesn't stand for anything. We were really adamant that we didn't actually want it to be like we didn't want it to stand for anything, and we also didn't necessarily want it to have like a genderized word in it, so like women or female or girl or anything. Um and we just wrote it down and we liked it. That's it. It's a really boring story actually. But we had just like tons of names like Equalize Her and all this stuff. And it was like, it doesn't really work. And then Phase, it was just simple. And really that's essentially what we're trying to do is like demystify and simplify music production so that anyone can just jump in, and start it and work with us and ask a question. So we felt like it worked quite well there. So
Right.
yeah, that's where the name came from.
And so I know that collaboration is very important to you in general. So do you offer opportunities for collaboration in Phase?
Well, we've got some stuff coming up really soon, actually. So at the moment, there's nothing being offered as such at the moment. We just launched on the 5th of April. So we're trying to build our mailing list, and we're just continuing in the Facebook group, just with a lot of conversation, sharing a lot of knowledge, and doing our tutorials every Monday on our YouTube channel. However, coming up, we've got a few events, a few remix opportunities, so various things that people can jump into if they want. I also run another group on based on Facebook called Sunday Songwriting, which kicked off way at the start of lockdown in 2020. There's tons of opportunity for collaboration as a producer in that group as well. That's predominantly a songwriting group, and there's a good few hundred people in there now. But we're actually, as we speak, so as we're recording this, it's the 4th of May. We're in the middle of a 3-week, 3-song challenge where the challenge is to write and finish a song in a week and do that for 3 times. And we all meet on Zoom and share it. But a lot of Phase and a lot of that group are crossover as well. So if you're in Phase through proxy of me, there is various other things. But definitely please do watch this space if you're interested in collaborations or just like remix submissions. And we've got something planned for Make Music Day as well, which is coming up in June. So there is some things on the horizon for sure to jump into and get stuck into.
Right. Well, I think it would be good also to talk a little bit about your own music. And you've got a single that has come out called There is a Universe. Inside of You, There is a Universe. So, do you want to just tell us about a little bit about that track?
Absolutely. Yes. So this is the first track I've released in a good number of years. And I was very, very, very scared. And I felt oh, it was a strange feeling. And I don't know how, if anyone listening who releases their own music, like I don't know if it ever feels less scary. It's maybe not quite the right word, but I wrote this track kind of on Valentine's Day, actually, a few years ago. I had a real dip in my music making. Um, 2018, 2019, I really struggled. I spent 2 years not doing any music. I felt like a family member had died and I was grieving for them. Like music just disappeared and I was burnt out and I was unfocused. I was beating myself up. I just was not being kind to myself at all. I was really not in love with myself and I was becoming I was becoming my own enemy. Um, so I took myself away to a wee recording studio in Biggar called Grand's House, run by a guy called Angus Lyon, and I just rented it out for a few days totally alone, and it was super snowy, and he just had two beautiful pianos there. And over the 3 days, I was like, right, I'm going to write loads of music. I'm going to write loads of songs. This is going to be my time. You know, you burst out of this space that I'm in, that I feel trapped in this dry spell. And I wrote pretty much nothing. Everything I wrote, I was like, oh, that's rubbish. I don't like that. But then this song happened, and I literally was crying as I just played it. And it's probably the most simple song that I've ever written. And I think there's a real reason for that. And for me, this song represents that turning point in my writing where I just let myself write what was in me instead of what I thought I should be writing or what I thought other people would find impressive, or, oh, that's a really smart chord sequence, or kind of maybe like the downside of studying music is everything was academically graded. When I studied composition, it had to reach a certain level, a mark, and quite often complexity was part of that. And I was like, I'm not complex anymore. I just feel like I want to just love myself. And so, yeah, this song just came out of me that day. And it's really about my partner who, um, at the time, we we had just met and I didn't yeah, I didn't really know what was going on or where to sit. I just knew that I was really enjoying this person and like everything about them was so brand new to me. Like everything about them. And I felt very much like he had this vastness within him that I'm never going to understand. I'm never going to inhabit. I don't even want it. I don't want the vastness of him. That's his. And I've got mine's. I'm like a well as well. So this song is just all about that experience of connecting with another person but realizing you're just two entirely separate entities, two totally separate spiritual beings on this planet in this realm that you can't intertwine. We've got this horrible narrative of we're not whole, that we need another person to feel whole, and it leaves people believe it, they feel it, and I've felt it before. Whereas at this stage in my life, I was just really respecting the separateness and enjoying it and loving that too. So that's what this song's about and is definitely a marker of my music being less about um, my ego and less about my pain and my suffering and more about the beauty of my life and more about the beauty within other human beings. And that if I just put my ego down for 2 minutes, I can let some of that beauty in and I benefit from it. And then I become more beautiful and then I can give it to someone else. And it's like it's like a galaxy, the chaos needs each other. It all needs it. There is order within the chaos eventually. But yeah, so that's a long-winded answer to what the song. It's a really simple 3-minute pop song though, right? So it's not even that deep. It's just a nice song.
Oh, it's very beautiful. I love that song. I've been listening to it on repeat. The piano is it's just so evocative, and I mean I could just hug you right now for what you just said, because I think it is a sign of maturity. You know, when we are growing up, well, we don't know anything really, except we don't even know ourselves. The only thing we can talk about is our experience, and I think as we grow older, we can sort of move on. There's nothing wrong, of course, with talking about our own experiences. It is the first thing we have to do to really understand ourselves and the world. But I think then at some point there is a time when we can get out of that milieu and explore further horizons. And also, you know, like you said, a song doesn't need to be complicated to be good. In fact, a lot of the best songs that have been written are extremely simple. But it's not the simplicity; it's the feeling that you are able to express through the music to reach somebody else's heart, if you like, or whatever you want to call it, spirit, soul. That's that communication between two islands, like you were alluding to. So. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And do you have anything coming up at the moment in terms of production of either your own music or other people's music that you'd like to share with the listeners?
Yes, yes. So I've got another single coming out. Oh, you heard it here first. I've got another single coming out in June. I'm releasing a lot of singles this year because last year was a year of inhalation and skill development and creating communities like Phase and sort of nourishment. And this year is a lot of action and output and expression. So I've got a lot of singles coming out this year. And I'm also working with an artist called Fenris based over in Berlin. And we've got some music coming out over this year as well, which is a totally different vibe from mine's, and I'm just the producer on that side. Um, and along with that, there's Song Seeds Songwriting Retreats, which is another space that I helped develop with another music artist called Becky Wallace, based in Glasgow, and that's in the last week of May from the 27th to the 30th. We're running a 4-day online songwriting retreat for writers to come have some boundary around their time so that within those boundaries, they can just go and write songs. And there's workshops and tasks and support and collaboration all within that weekend as well. So, yeah, there's a lot going on. But those are the main things coming from me soon.
Okay, wonderful. So, for the listeners out there, if you want to know more about any of these things, just head on over onto the show notes where I will be posting the links to Rosie. So, Rosie, thank you so much for really sharing your experience and telling us your story. It's been really good to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for getting in touch and for allowing me this space as well to talk. I can talk a lot, so I really do appreciate it. Thank you.
That was my guest, whom I'd like to thank once again for coming to the show. Every week, I'll be chatting to fantastic indie performers to uncover what it really takes to be a female independent musician in this day and age, and how we can support one another to keep shining our own unique light onto the world through our creative endeavors. So make sure you don't miss out by subscribing and leaving a review for Dare to Be Seen. Thank you for listening.
That's all for this episode of Dare to Be Seen. Join the conversation on daretobeseencommunity.com and help us create an empowering community of independent female singer-songwriters, composers, and musicians who support one another. For show notes, resources, and information on today's episode, visit daretobeseenpodcast.com. And remember, shine your own unique light onto the world. It needs it.